So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Tonight, we're not just talking about ancient Rome, we're living it. You'll wake up as a Roman citizen, feel the cobblestones beneath your feet, smell the bread baking in the morning air, and navigate the complexities of daily life in the greatest empire the world had ever seen. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's step back 2,000 years into a world where your morning routine could determine whether you lived or died. You stir as the first pale light of dawn filters through the small window of your modest apartment. But this isn't your apartment. This is your cubiculum, a tiny room barely large enough for your simple wooden bed and a single oil lamp. The year is 125 AD, and you are Marcus Flavius, a freedman who runs a small bakery in the Subura district of Rome. The air is already thick with the smell of wood smoke and something else, something distinctly Roman that takes a moment to identify. It's the scent of garum, that fermented fish sauce that Romans put on absolutely everything, wafting up from the tavern below. Your landlord, Lucius Varro, owns this entire insula, a 5-story apartment building that houses dozens of families like yours. Well, not quite like yours, because most of your neighbors are still slaves. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, and immediately your feet touch the cold stone floor. No carpets here. No wooden floors, just stone and clay tiles that seem to absorb the chill of the Roman dawn. Your tunic laid out the night before is made of rough wool that scratches slightly against your skin. It's brown, the color of the earth, because bright colors cost money you don't have. Only the wealthy can afford the vibrant purples and blues that mark status in Roman society. As you dress, you hear the sounds of the city waking up around you. The clatter of wooden wheels on stone, that's the cart of Gaius the vegetable seller, making his rounds before the sun gets too high. The rhythmic tapping of a hammer, that's Brutus the cobbler already at work in his shop across the narrow street. And there's something else, a sound that makes you pause, the steady tramp of hobnailed boots on stone. The Praetorian Guard is doing their morning patrol. You peek out your window, which is nothing more than a rectangular opening in the wall, no glass, just a wooden shutter that you can close against the rain. The street below is only about 8 feet wide, so narrow that you could practically shake hands with your neighbor across the way. In fact, you've done exactly that on several occasions. The morning light creates sharp shadows in the narrow alley, and you can see the detritus of yesterday's life-broken pottery animal bones and what looks like the remains of someone's dinner scraped out onto the street. The Romans haven't invented garbage collection yet. They've invented aqueducts, concrete, and a legal system that will influence the world for 2 millennia, but somehow nobody's figured out what to do with trash except throw it out the window and hope it becomes someone else's problem. Your stomach growls, reminding you that you haven't eaten since yesterday afternoon. This is normal. Most Romans eat only one main meal a day, usually in the late afternoon or early evening. Breakfast, if you have it at all, is typically just bread dipped in wine or water. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you might have a bit of cheese or honey. But honey is expensive, and cheese, well, cheese is complicated. You see, Roman cheese isn't aged in cool caves like medieval cheese. It's made fresh daily and eaten quickly before it spoils. The process involves rennet, which comes from the stomach lining of young animals, and the whole thing has to be done with precise timing, or you end up with something that looks like cheese but tastes like regret. As you prepare to leave your cubiculum, you perform a small ritual that every Roman knows by heart. You touch the small bronze figurine of your household gods, the Lares and Penates, that sits in a tiny shrine called a lararium. These aren't the grand gods of the pantheon like Jupiter or Mars. These are the humble deities of hearth and home, the ones who protect your family and ensure that your bread rises properly and your milk doesn't sour. The figurine is worn smooth by countless touches, and as your fingers brush against it, you whisper a quick prayer. Let the ovens burn evenly today. Let the customers pay their debts, and let the grain arrive from Egypt without weevils. These aren't grand requests for military victory or political power. These are the prayers of a working man in a world where a bad batch of grain can mean the difference between prosperity and starvation. Stepping out of your building, you're immediately struck by the chaos of Roman street life. The Sabura district is one of the most densely populated areas in the known world, and it shows. People are everywhere, slaves carrying amphora of wine merchants, haggling over prices, children playing with hoops and sticks, and the ever-present beggars who seem to multiply like rats in the shadows. The street itself is a marvel of Roman engineering, paved with polygonal stones that fit together so perfectly that weeds struggle to grow between them. These aren't just any stones, they're made of volcanic rock from the hills outside Rome, chosen specifically because they don't become slippery when wet. The Romans learned this the hard way after too many accidents on rainy days. But here's what strikes you most: the smell. Modern people think they know what cities smell like, but ancient Rome is in a category all its own. There's the omnipresent scent of wood smoke from countless cooking fires, the sharp tang of vinegar from the fulleries where cloth is cleaned, and the earthy smell of fresh bread from dozens of bakeries. But underneath it all is something else: the smell of human waste. You see, Rome may have invented the aqueduct, but they haven't quite figured out sewage. The Cloaca Maxima, Rome's great sewer, handles some of the waste from the city center, but here in the Subura, people still use chamber pots and dump the contents wherever they can. The lucky ones live near a public latrine, which is essentially a stone bench with holes in it positioned over a flowing stream. The unlucky ones, well, they make do. As you walk toward your bakery, you navigate around the various obstacles that make Roman streets an adventure. There's a broken cart blocking half the roadway, its owner arguing loudly with a customer about who's responsible for the spilled grain. A small crowd has gathered to watch because entertainment is scarce, and a good argument is almost as good as a gladiator fight. You pass a fullery, a combination laundry and dry cleaner, where workers are jumping up and down in large vats of cloth, their feet stained purple from the dyes. The process involves human urine, which is collected from public latrines and aged until it becomes ammonia-rich enough to clean cloth. It's effective, but the smell is memorable. Next door is a thermopolium, essentially a Roman fast food restaurant. The owner, a Greek freedman named Theophilus, is already ladling hot soup into bowls for early customers. The food is kept warm in large terracotta jars embedded in a stone counter, and the smell of simmering lentils and barley makes your mouth water. But you keep walking. You have your own business to run. The street narrows as you approach the forum, and suddenly you're walking in shadow. The buildings here are so tall, some 5 or 6 stories, that sunlight only reaches the street for a few hours each day. This creates a peculiar microclimate where the ground level is cool and damp while the upper floors bake in the sun. It's no wonder that the wealthy live in single-story houses with private courtyards, while the poor are stacked like cordwood in these towering insulae. You pass a group of slaves carrying a litter inside, which you can just make out the pale, well-fed face of a Roman senator. He's wearing a toga with a purple stripe, the toga praetexta that marks his rank, and he looks supremely comfortable as he's carried above the chaos of street life. His slaves are sweating in the morning sun, their faces grim with concentration, as they navigate the narrow streets without jostling their precious cargo. This is the reality of Roman society for every citizen like you. There are 2 or 3 slaves. They're not all badly treated. Many household slaves live better than free citizens, but they're still property bought and sold like livestock. You know this because you were once a slave yourself, freed by your master in his will after 20 years of faithful service. The iron ring on your finger marks you as a libertus, a freedman with all the complex social implications that entails. As you turn the corner toward your bakery, you hear the sound that signals the beginning of every Roman day, the crowing of roosters. But these aren't countryside roosters. These are urban chickens kept in tiny coops on rooftops and in courtyards throughout the city. They're not kept for eggs so much as for their ability to tell time. In a world without clocks, the rooster's crow is as reliable as any sundial. Your bakery is a modest affair, a single room with a large brick oven that dominates one wall and a few wooden tables for kneading dough. The oven itself is a masterpiece of Roman engineering, dome-shaped and built with special bricks that can withstand intense heat. The floor is made of smooth stone that retains heat evenly, and the entrance is just the right size to allow maximum heat retention while still permitting access. But here's the thing about Roman bread that would surprise modern people. It's not just food, it's currency. The grain dole, the free distribution of wheat to Roman citizens, is one of the pillars of imperial policy. Bread and circuses, the saying goes, are what keep the masses happy. Your bakery serves both those who receive free grain and those who pay for their bread, and the difference in quality is noticeable. The free grain often arrives infested with weevils mixed with sand to increase its weight, or partially spoiled from the long journey from Egypt. You've become expert at sifting out the insects and grit, but there's only so much you can do. The bread made from government grain is dense, dark, and has a slightly bitter taste that no amount of salt can disguise. For paying customers, you offer a different product entirely. You have access to higher quality grain that arrives by private ship from Sicily or North Africa. This grain is cleaner, less infested, and produces bread that's lighter in color and sweeter in taste. It's still a far cry from modern bread. There's no sugar, no eggs, no butter, but it's edible without having to chew around the occasional weevil. The process of making bread in ancient Rome is both simple and complex. Simple because the ingredients are just flour, water, salt, and sourdough starter. Complex because everything depends on timing, temperature, and experience. You start by mixing the flour with water in a wooden trough, adding salt for flavor and preservation. The salt comes from the solar evaporation ponds at Ostia, Rome's port city, and it's coarse and gray, nothing like the refined white salt of later eras. The sourdough starter is your most precious possession. It's a living culture of wild yeasts and bacteria that you've been nurturing for years. Every day you feed it with fresh flour and water, and every day it gives you the ability to make bread rise. This starter is so important that bakers often leave it to their sons in their wills, because starting a new culture from scratch can take months. Kneading the dough is backbreaking work. You use your whole body, leaning into the motion as you work the gluten until the dough becomes smooth and elastic. There are no machines to help, just your hands, your arms, and your back. Most bakers develop distinctive calluses and muscle definition from this daily ritual. While the dough rises, you prepare the oven. This involves building a fire directly on the oven floor. Using dry wood, oak is preferred because it burns hot and clean. The fire must be maintained for several hours until the bricks are thoroughly heated. You can tell when the oven is ready by the color of the dome. When it turns from black to white, it's time to rake out the coals. The actual baking is an art form. You use a long wooden paddle called a peel to slide the loaves onto the hot stone floor. The bread must be positioned carefully so that each loaf gets even heat, and the door must be sealed to trap the steam that gives the bread its crust. There's no thermometer, no timer, just experience and instinct. As the bread bakes, you turn your attention to your other products. Romans don't eat just bread, they consume a variety of baked goods that would be familiar to modern palates. There's a libum, a sweet cake made with honey and cheese that's often used in religious ceremonies. There's placenta, a layered pastry that's surprisingly similar to modern phyllo dough. And there's panis quadratus, a round loaf scored into 8 sections that's designed to be broken apart and shared. Each product requires different techniques and timing. The libum must be baked at a lower temperature so the honey doesn't burn. The placenta requires careful layering and precise timing to achieve the proper texture. The panis quadratus must be scored just deeply enough to create clean breaks without compromising the structure. But the real challenge isn't technical, it's economic. You're competing with dozens of other bakeries in the district, and your customers are price sensitive. A loaf of bread costs about the same as a cup of wine, which means that for poor families, bread represents a significant portion of their daily budget. You can't afford to waste ingredients or burn batches because every mistake comes directly out of your slim profit margin. The Roman economy runs on credit, and so does your bakery. Customers often pay weekly or monthly, and you have to track who owes what without the benefit of paper money or standardized coins. Payment comes in the form of bronze sestertii, silver denarii, and occasionally gold aureii, but the coins are often worn smooth or clipped by unscrupulous merchants. You've learned to test each coin by its weight and sound because counterfeit currency is a constant problem. As the morning progresses, the rhythm of your work becomes almost meditative. The sounds of the city fade into background noise as you focus on the tactile pleasures of your craft, the feel of properly kneaded dough, the sight of golden loaves emerging from the oven, the satisfaction of a day's work well done. This is honest labor, the kind that builds character and feeds communities. Your first customer of the day is Claudia, a matrona from a wealthy household in the Palatine district. She's accompanied by 2 slaves, one to carry her purchases and another for protection. Claudia is wearing a stola, a long dress that marks her as a married woman of good standing, and her hair is elaborately arranged in the latest fashion with curls and braids that must have taken hours to achieve. But here's what's interesting about Claudia. She's not just buying bread for her family. She's buying it for her entire household, which includes not only her husband and children, but also their slaves, freedmen, and various hangers-on. A wealthy Roman household might include 30 or 40 people, all of whom need to be fed daily. Marcus, she says in the cultured Latin accent of the upper classes, I need 20 loaves of your finest bread and make sure they're properly baked. Last week's batch was too soft in the center. She's referring to the common problem of underbaked bread, which can happen when the oven isn't hot enough or when the baker tries to rush the process. You nod respectfully and begin selecting loaves from your best batch. The bread is golden brown with a firm crust that gives slightly when pressed. You wrap each loaf in clean linen cloth, a service that adds to the cost, but is expected by wealthy customers. As you work, Claudia continues talking. This is part of the social ritual of shopping in ancient Rome. Customers don't just buy and leave, they exchange news, gossip, and opinions. It's how information spreads through the city faster than any official dispatch. Have you heard about the new law regarding gladiator fights? She asks. The emperor is limiting the number of shows that can be held each month. He says it's too expensive, but I think he's worried about the crowds getting too excited. This is valuable information. As a tradesman, you need to know about political developments that might affect your business. Gladiator shows bring huge crowds to Rome, and crowds mean customers. If the shows are reduced, it could hurt your sales. I hadn't heard you reply, wrapping another loaf. What's the new limit? Only 2 shows per month and no more than 50 pairs of gladiators per show, she says. The grain merchants are furious because they make a fortune selling food to the spectators. As you finish wrapping her order, Claudia's slave steps forward to pay. He hands you a small leather pouch containing silver denarii, enough to buy a week's worth of grain for your bakery. The coins are heavy in your hand, and you can feel the raised profile of Emperor Hadrian on one side and the goddess Roma on the other. Your next customer is very different. Lucius is a construction worker who helps build the grand public buildings that make Rome famous. He's covered in dust and mortar, and his hands are scarred from years of working with stone and metal. He wants just one loaf of bread, and he wants it from the batch made with government grain. Make it a big one, he says, counting out bronze sestertii. I've got a long day ahead, and this has to last until evening. You select a dense, heavy loaf that will provide maximum nutrition for minimum cost. Lucius examines it carefully, pressing the crust to check for doneness and looking for any signs of mold or infestation. He knows bread like you know construction. It's a matter of survival. You hear about the accident at the Colosseum, he asks, tearing off a corner of the bread and chewing thoughtfully. One of the lifting mechanisms broke during a beast hunt, and a lion got loose in the stands. This is the kind of news that spreads through the working class districts like wildfire. The Colosseum is one of the most dangerous places in Rome, not just for the gladiators, but for the workers who maintain the complex machinery that makes the shows possible. Anyone hurt, you ask? 3 spectators mauled before they got the lion back under control, he says. The engineer responsible got fed to the next batch of lions. The emperor doesn't tolerate incompetence when it comes to public safety. As the morning progresses, you serve a steady stream of customers, each with their own story and their own place in the complex hierarchy of Roman society. There's Marcus the scribe who buys expensive white bread made from imported wheat. There's Cassia, the tavern keeper, who buys day-old bread at a discount to make breadcrumbs for her kitchen. There's old Titus, the veteran who pays with coins from his military pension and always asks for the hardest crust because his teeth are mostly gone. Each transaction is a small window into Roman life. You learn about political developments, economic trends, social gossip, and neighborhood problems. By midday, you know more about what's happening in Rome than most senators. But you also learn about the darker side of Roman life. There's Julia, whose husband was killed in a construction accident and who now survives by selling her body to passing soldiers. There's Gaius, who was once a wealthy merchant but lost everything when his ships were sunk by pirates. There's Flavia, whose son was conscripted into the legions and hasn't been heard from in 3 years. These are the people who keep Rome running: the workers, the craftsmen, the small merchants who provide the goods and services that make urban life possible. They're not senators or generals, but they're the backbone of the empire. By the 6th hour of the day, what we would call noon, your bakery is experiencing its busiest period. This is when most Romans take their main meal, and fresh bread is an essential component of almost every dish. The streets are crowded with people heading home from work, stopping to buy food on the way. The lunch trade is different from the morning trade. People are hungry in a hurry and often irritable from the heat. Rome in summer can be brutal, with temperatures soaring and the stone buildings radiating heat like ovens. The narrow streets trap the hot air, creating a stifling environment that tests everyone's patience. You're running low on your best bread, and you have to make quick decisions about which customers get priority. Do you save the last few loaves for your regular customers, or do you sell them to whoever pays first? It's a delicate balance between business ethics and practical economics. A group of German slaves enters your shop, sent by their master to buy bread for his afternoon meal. They speak broken Latin with thick accents, and they're clearly intimidated by the chaos of Roman street life. You take pity on them and help them select appropriate loaves, explaining the differences between the various types of bread. These slaves are part of the constant stream of conquered peoples who flow into Rome from the expanding frontiers of the empire. They're valuable property, healthy young men who can be trained for various tasks, but they're also human beings struggling to adapt to a completely foreign culture. As you wrap their purchases, you notice that one of them has a fresh brand on his shoulder, the mark of his owner burned into his flesh. It's a reminder of the brutal reality underlying Roman prosperity. All of this wealth, all of this culture, all of this bread exists because Rome has conquered and enslaved half the known world. The afternoon also brings a different kind of customer. The professional food buyers who supply the large households and businesses. These men know exactly what they want and exactly what they're willing to pay. They're not interested in small talk or social niceties. They're here to conduct business. Marcus Crassus, not the famous general, but a freedman who has taken his former master's name, runs the food service for a large inn near the Forum. He needs 40 loaves of bread daily, and he's willing to pay a premium for reliability and quality. This kind of steady business is the backbone of your operation. I need the bread delivered by the 8th hour, he says, consulting a wax tablet where he's written his daily requirements. And I need it to be consistent quality, no burnt loaves, no undercooked centers, no foreign matter. You nod and make a note on your own tablet. Delivery is an additional service that you provide for important customers using a slave boy named Quintus, who knows every street in the district. It's a small thing, but it sets you apart from competitors who expect customers to carry their own purchases. As you prepare Crassus's order, you overhear a conversation between two customers that catches your attention. They're discussing the grain supply from Egypt, which is apparently delayed due to storms in the Mediterranean. This is serious news for every baker in Rome because Egyptian grain is the foundation of the entire food system. My brother-in-law works at the docks, one of them says. He says the ships are 2 weeks overdue and the grain warehouses are starting to run low. Prices are going to go up soon. This is the kind of information that can make or break a small business. If grain prices rise, you'll have to raise your prices or accept lower profits. If you raise prices too much, you'll lose customers to competitors. If you don't raise them enough, you'll lose money on every loaf. You make a mental note to visit the grain market early tomorrow morning to check on supply and prices. In the meantime, you'll have to hope that your current inventory lasts until the situation stabilizes. The afternoon heat is becoming oppressive, and you notice that your ovens are making the shop almost unbearably hot. This is one of the occupational hazards of being a baker in Rome. You're constantly exposed to high temperatures that can cause heat exhaustion or worse. You take a break to drink some pasca, a mixture of water and vinegar. That's the standard drink for working people. It tastes terrible, but it helps replace the salt lost through sweating and provides some protection against waterborne diseases. Wine is safer than water in ancient Rome, but it's also more expensive and less practical for daytime work. As you rest, you notice a commotion in the street outside. A crowd has gathered around a man who's shouting something in heavily accented Latin. He's holding up a scroll and reading from it, but the words are hard to make out over the noise of the crowd. What's happening? You ask a customer who's just come in from the street. It's an announcement from the emperor, she says. Something about new taxes on imported goods. The merchants are not happy. This is how most Romans learn about government policies, through public announcements read in the streets and forums. There are no newspapers, no radio, no television. Information spreads through word of mouth, and it often gets distorted in the process. You step outside to listen more carefully. The announcer is a government official protected by two Praetorian guards who keep the crowd at a respectful distance. He's reading from an official scroll, his voice carrying the authority of imperial power. By order of the Emperor Hadrian, he reads, all goods imported from provinces outside Italy will be subject to an additional tax of 5% to be collected at the point of entry and paid in silver coin. The crowd murmurs unhappily. Import taxes eventually get passed down to consumers, which means higher prices for everything from spices to silk. For a baker who depends on imported grain, this could be a significant problem. You return to your shop with a heavy heart. The afternoon is waning and you still have work to do, but the news about taxes and grain shortages has cast a shadow over what started as a good day. This is the reality of small business in the Roman Empire. You're constantly at the mercy of forces beyond your control. As the sun begins to set, your bakery shifts into evening mode. The ovens are cooling down. The day's bread is mostly sold, and you're preparing for the cena, the main meal of the day, when Romans gather with family and friends to eat, drink, and socialize. But your work isn't done. Romans often buy bread in the evening to take home for dinner, and you also provide special items for those who can afford them. There's honey cake for dessert, seasoned bread made with herbs and oil, and occasionally, if you can get the ingredients, sweet pastries made with imported dates and nuts. The evening customers are different from the daytime crowd. They're more relaxed, more social, and more willing to spend money on luxury items. A successful merchant might buy honey cakes for his dinner guests, or a wealthy matron might order special bread for a religious ceremony. Your most interesting evening customer is Gaius Scribonius, a professional dinner guest who makes his living by attending the meals of wealthy Romans. He's an educated man who can recite poetry, discuss philosophy, and provide witty conversation in exchange for food and wine. It's a precarious existence, but it's better than begging. Marcus, my friend, he says, with the easy familiarity of a regular customer. I need something special tonight. I'm dining with Senator Aurelius, and I want to bring a gift that will impress him. You show him a selection of your finest products, white bread made from imported wheat, honey cakes shaped like roses, and a special loaf embedded with pine nuts and dried fruits. These items cost more than most people earn in a day, but for Scribonius, they're an investment in his career. The honey cakes, he decides, and wrap them in your finest cloth. Presentation is everything when dining with senators. As you prepare his order, Scribonius regales you with stories from last night's dinner party. He has a gift for observation and a tongue sharpened by years of navigating Roman high society. You should have seen the host's wife, he says. She was wearing enough jewelry to buy a small farm, and she spent the entire meal complaining about the quality of the fish sauce. Meanwhile, her husband was getting drunk on wine that cost more than most people's houses. This is valuable entertainment for you. As a working man, you'll never attend a senatorial dinner party, but through Scribonius, you get a glimpse into the world of wealth and power that rules Rome. The evening also brings family time. Your own household is small, just yourself, your wife Livia, and your young son Marcus. But in the Roman tradition, you also support your elderly mother and a freed slave named Drusus, who's too old to work, but too loyal to abandon. Dinner is a simple affair by Roman standards. You eat bread, of course, but also cheese, olives, and vegetables from the small garden behind your shop. There's wine mixed with water, and occasionally, if business has been good, a small piece of meat or fish. The conversation around your table reflects the concerns of ordinary Romans. Livia worries about the rising cost of clothing and the quality of the water supply. Your son asks questions about the gladiator fights and wonders if he'll be tall enough to serve in the legions. Your mother shares memories of her youth and complains about the changing times. When I was young, she says, bread was bread. Now you have to worry about weevils and sand and whether the grain is spoiled. The world is getting worse. This is a common refrain among older Romans. They remember a simpler time when the empire was smaller, taxes were lower, and life was supposedly better. Whether this is true or just nostalgia is hard to say, but it's a constant undercurrent in Roman society. After dinner, you perform the evening ritual of banking your ovens. This involves carefully arranging the coals and ash to preserve heat for the next day's baking. It's a skilled technique that can save hours of work in the morning, but it requires precise timing and attention to detail. The process is almost meditative. You work by lamplight, your hands moving with practiced efficiency as you prepare for tomorrow's labor. The shop is quiet, except for the soft crackling of cooling coals and the distant sounds of the city settling into night. As you work, you reflect on the day's events, the good, steady sales, no major problems, enough profit to cover your expenses. The bad news of rising grain prices and import taxes that could hurt your business. The uncertain political changes that might affect the entire economy. This is the reality of life in ancient Rome. You're part of the greatest empire in history, but you're also just one small businessman trying to make a living in a complex and often unpredictable world. Success depends not just on your own skills and hard work, but on forces beyond your control. Weather, politics, war, and the whims of distant emperors. As full darkness falls over Rome, the city doesn't sleep, it transforms. The daytime population of citizens, slaves, and merchants gives way to a different cast of characters. The vigils who patrol the streets, the night workers who clean the public buildings, and the various people who conduct business, better done in darkness. You're preparing to close your shop when you hear the sound of marching feet on the cobblestones. It's a patrol of vigiles, the night watch, that serves as Rome's fire department and police force. They're carrying torches and water buckets ready to respond to the fires that are a constant threat in a city built largely of wood and thatch. The vigils are mostly freedmen and slaves commanded by officers drawn from the lower ranks of Roman society. They're not prestigious like the Praetorian Guard, but they're essential to the functioning of the city. Without them, Rome would burn down within a week. Evening Marcus calls out Decimus, the patrol leader. He's a regular customer who buys bread for his men during their long shifts. Quiet night so far, but we're keeping an eye on that new construction site near the Forum. Too many workers smoking around the wooden scaffolding. You nod and wish him well. Fire is every Roman's nightmare, especially in the dense neighborhoods where buildings are packed together like kindling. A small cooking fire can become a neighborhood-destroying inferno in minutes. After the patrol passes, you finish your evening preparations. The shop must be secured against thieves who are drawn to bakeries because bread is both valuable and portable. You bar the windows with heavy wooden shutters and secure the door with iron bolts and chains. But security is about more than just locks. You also need to maintain good relationships with your neighbors who serve as an informal neighborhood watch. The cobbler across the street keeps an eye on your shop during the day, and you return the favor at night. It's a system of mutual protection that has evolved over generations of urban living. Your final task is to prepare tomorrow's sourdough starter. This involves mixing flour and water into the existing culture and covering it with a damp cloth. The process is simple, but it requires daily attention. Skip a day and the starter dies. Skip 2 days and you're out of business. As you work, you hear the sounds of Roman nightlife filtering through the shutters. There's music from a nearby tavern where customers are singing drinking songs in languages from across the empire. There's the clip-clop of horses pulling a wealthy family's carriage through the narrow streets. And there's the occasional shout or laugh that suggests someone is having a better evening than most. The night sounds are different from the day sounds. They're more intimate, more human. During the day, Rome is a machine of commerce and politics. At night, it becomes a collection of individual lives, each with its own joys and sorrows. You climb the narrow stairs to your family's living quarters, a small apartment above the shop. The rooms are modest but comfortable with painted walls that depict scenes from Roman mythology. Your wife has decorated the space with small touches that make it feel like home flowers in clay pots, colorful cushions stuffed with wool, and a small bronze mirror that catches the lamplight. Livia is waiting for you with a cup of warm wine mixed with honey and spices, a luxury that you allow yourselves at the end of particularly good days. She's been mending one of your son's tunics by lamplight, her needle moving with the practiced efficiency of a woman who has been managing a household for 15 years. "How were the sales today?" she asks, looking up from her work. This is more than casual conversation as your business partner. She needs to know about the financial situation. Roman wives, especially in working-class families, are full participants in family enterprises. "Good morning, slow afternoon," you report. But Claudia placed a large order and the construction workers have been buying regularly. "I'm worried about the grain situation, though. Prices might go up soon." Livia nods thoughtfully. She understands the economics of the bakery as well as you do, sometimes better. Women in Rome may not have formal political power, but they often manage the practical aspects of daily life. "I've been talking to the other wives," she says. "There are rumors that the emperor is planning another military campaign in Germania. If that's true, grain prices will definitely rise. The army consumes enormous amounts of food." This kind of intelligence network wives, talking to other wives, is often more accurate than official government announcements. Roman women may be excluded from the Senate and the Forum, but they have their own channels of communication that can be remarkably effective. As you sip your wine, you discuss plans for the next day. There's grain to be purchased, accounts to be settled, and equipment to be maintained. The life of a small businessman is never ending, a constant cycle of preparation work and planning. Your son Marcus has fallen asleep on his small bed in the corner of the room. At 10 years old, he's already helping in the bakery, learning the trade that will likely support him for the rest of his life. Roman society offers some opportunities for social mobility. Successful freedmen can become wealthy, and their children can even enter the equestrian class, but most people follow in their parents' footsteps. Looking at your sleeping son, you wonder what kind of world he'll inherit. Will the empire continue to expand and prosper? Will the grain supplies remain stable? Will there be wars, plagues, or political upheavals that could destroy everything you've built? These are the eternal concerns of parents made more acute by the uncertainties of ancient life. In Rome, fortunes can change overnight. A fire can destroy a business, a plague can kill a family, a war can disrupt the entire economy. All you can do is work hard, save what you can, and hope that the gods look favorably upon your efforts. As the night deepens, you perform one final ritual before sleep. You extinguish the oil lamps one by one, leaving only a small flame burning before the household shrine. This flame will burn all night, a connection between your family and the divine forces that govern the universe. The prayer you whisper is simple and heartfelt. "Grant us another day of honest work. Keep our family safe and let the bread rise properly." In the grand scope of Roman history, it's a small prayer from an insignificant man, but it represents something important, the daily faith and determination that keeps civilization running. The next morning brings an unexpected visitor to your bakery. Gaius Marcellus, a prosperous grain merchant who owns several ships that trade between Rome and Egypt. He's not here to buy bread. Men of his status have slaves to handle such mundane tasks. He's here to discuss a business proposition that could change your life. "Marcus Flavius," he says, using your full name in the formal manner of Roman business, "I have a proposal that might interest you. My daughter Claudia is of marriageable age, and I'm looking for a suitable husband from among the respectable tradesmen of the city. This catches you completely off guard. Your son Marcus is only 10 years old, far too young for marriage. But then you realize that Marcellus isn't talking about your son. He's talking about a business alliance sealed by marriage, and in Roman society, such arrangements often involve extended families. My nephew, you say slowly, understanding the implications. Lucius Flavius. He's 18, learned the baker's trade from me, and is looking to establish his own shop. Marcellus nods approvingly. Exactly. A young man with prospects trained in a respectable trade from a family I know and trust. Such marriages often work out well for all parties involved. This is how marriages are arranged in Roman society, particularly among the working classes. Love might develop over time, but the initial decision is based on practical considerations, economic compatibility, family reputation, and mutual advantage. What would be the terms, you ask, slipping into the careful language of negotiation? A dowry of 10,000 sestertii, Marcellus replies, plus a shop space in a good location near the Circus Maximus. In return, your nephew would agree to supply bread exclusively to my household and business operations. It's a generous offer, more generous than you expected. 10,000 sestertii is enough to set up a substantial bakery, and the location near the Circus Maximus would guarantee steady foot traffic from spectators attending the chariot races. But there's a catch, as there always is in Roman business deals. Exclusively means that Lucius would become essentially a client of Marcellus, dependent on his patronage for success. It's a form of economic bondage that many Romans accept as the price of advancement. I'll need to discuss this with my nephew, you say diplomatically, and with my wife, of course. Such decisions affect the entire family. Marcellus understands. Roman. Marriages aren't just unions between two individuals. They're alliances between families, creating networks of obligation and mutual support that can last for generations. After he leaves, you're left to contemplate the complexities of Roman social mobility. Your nephew Lucius is a skilled baker and a decent young man, but without capital or connections, his prospects are limited. This marriage could lift him into the ranks of the prosperous merchant class, but at the cost of his independence. It's a perfect example of how Roman society works. Formal slavery may be limited to conquered peoples and debtors, but there are many forms of informal bondage that tie people together in webs of obligation and dependence. Freedom in the Roman sense isn't just about legal status, it's about economic independence. The marriage negotiations also highlight the role of women in Roman society. Claudia Marcellus's daughter has no say in the choice of her husband. Her father will decide based on his assessment of what's best for the family's interests. Yet once married, she'll have significant power within her household, managing servants, controlling domestic finances, and potentially influencing her husband's business decisions. Roman women exist in a curious legal limbo. They can't vote, hold office, or represent themselves in court, but they can own property, inherit wealth, and divorce their husbands. Many wealthy Roman women are more powerful than poor Roman men, using their economic resources to influence politics and society. As you work through the morning serving customers and managing your ovens, you find yourself thinking about the broader implications of the marriage proposal. If Lucius accepts, it will strengthen your family's position in Roman society. You'll have a connection to the grain trade, which could provide security during times of shortage. You'll also have access to Marcellus's network of contacts, which could open up new business opportunities, but there are risks as well. If Marcellus's business fails, Lucius could be ruined along with him. If political changes affect the grain trade, the entire arrangement could collapse. And if the marriage proves unhappy, the business relationship could become a source of constant tension. These are the calculations that Roman families make every day. Life in the empire is full of opportunities, but each opportunity comes with corresponding risks. Success requires not just hard work and skill, but also careful judgment about which alliances to form and which risks to take. Your contemplation is interrupted by the arrival of your nephew Lucius himself, who comes by the bakery every few days to help with heavy work and learn advanced techniques. He's a serious young man dedicated to his craft and completely unaware that his future is being negotiated by his elders. "Uncle," he says, washing his hands in preparation for kneading dough, "I've been thinking about opening my own shop. There's a space available near the baths of Caracalla that might work well." You look at him thoughtfully. He's a good baker, but naive about the complexities of Roman business. The space near the baths might seem attractive, but it's in a district dominated by wealthy families who prefer to have bread delivered rather than shopping for it themselves. Without connections to the right households, he'd struggle to build a customer base. "Lucius, you say carefully. What if I told you there might be a better opportunity? Something that would give you not just a shop, but also a wife, a dowry, and connections to the grain trade." His eyes widen with interest and suspicion. "What kind of opportunity?" You explain Marcellus's proposal, watching his face carefully for his reaction. Roman law gives fathers and uncles significant authority over young men's marriages, but in practice, most families prefer to have the consent of all parties involved. Lucius listens thoughtfully, asking practical questions about the dowry, the shop location, and the business arrangement. He's approaching this as he would any other business decision, weighing advantages against disadvantages. "What's she like?" he finally asks. "Claudia, I mean." "I don't know her personally," you admit, "but Marcellus is a respectable man, and his family has a good reputation. She's been raised properly, knows how to manage a household, and presumably understands the expectations of a merchant's wife." This is typical of Roman marriage negotiations. Personal compatibility is less important than social and economic factors. The assumption is that mutual respect and affection will develop over time based on shared interests and common goals. "I'd like to meet her," Lucius says, "formally with both families present. If we're going to work together for the rest of our lives, we should at least be able to talk to each other." This is a reasonable request, and one that shows Lucius has a practical understanding of Roman marriage customs. While love isn't the foundation of the arrangement, basic compatibility is still important for long-term success. 3 days later, your worst fears about the grain supply are confirmed. A messenger arrives at dawn with news that a storm has sunk 6 grain ships in the Mediterranean, destroying enough wheat to feed Rome for a week. The remaining ships are delayed by weather, and the grain warehouses are running dangerously low. Within hours, the effects ripple through the city's food system. The price of grain doubles, then triples. Bakers who bought grain yesterday find themselves with inventory worth far more than they paid, while those who delayed their purchases face potential bankruptcy. You're in the fortunate position of having purchased grain 2 days ago, which means you can continue operating while your competitors struggle. But this advantage comes with its own moral dilemma. Do you raise your prices to match the market, or do you keep them stable to help your regular customers? The question becomes more complicated when Claudia, your wealthy morning customer, arrives with an unusual request. Instead of her normal order of 20 loaves, she wants to buy 100 loaves, clearly intending to hoard bread against the expected shortages. "I'll pay double the normal price," she offers, counting out gold aurae that gleam in the morning light. "My household needs to be prepared for whatever comes next." It's a tempting offer. 100 loaves at double price, would provide enough profit to weather the crisis comfortably. But it would also leave you with very little bread for your regular customers, many of whom depend on your shop for their daily sustenance. Before you can answer Lucius, the construction worker enters the shop. He's carrying his usual handful of bronze coins, enough for one loaf of bread. But when he sees Claudia and hears her offer, his face darkens with understanding. "So that's how it is," he says bitterly. "The rich get richer and the poor get hungrier. Some things never change, even in the greatest empire in the world." This is the eternal tension in Roman society, and indeed in any society with significant inequality. Economic crises reveal the fault lines that divide rich from poor citizen, from slave insider from outsider. You find yourself in an impossible position. As a businessman, you have an obligation to maximize your profits and provide for your family's security. But as a member of the community, you have a responsibility to treat your customers fairly and maintain social stability. "Claudia," you say diplomatically, "I can sell you 40 loaves at the regular price. That's double your usual order, which should be sufficient for your household's needs. The rest of my inventory needs to go to my regular customers." She's not pleased with this compromise, but she accepts it with the grudging respect that Romans show for principled decisions. "Very well, Marcus, but remember this when the crisis passes. Those who help their friends in difficult times deserve consideration when times are good." After she leaves, Lucius approaches the counter with obvious relief. "Thank you," he says simply. "There are plenty of bakers who would have taken her offer." "And they'll probably make more money than I will," you reply, wrapping his loaf. "But money isn't everything. Reputation and relationships last longer than any particular crisis." As the day progresses, news of the grain shortage spreads throughout the city. Crowds gather at the public announcements where government officials try to maintain calm by promising that new shipments will arrive soon. But everyone knows that soon in governmental terms can mean weeks or months. The Emperor Hadrian himself makes a rare public appearance, touring the docks and conferring with grain merchants. His message is carefully calibrated to balance honesty with reassurance. The situation is serious but manageable, temporary, but requiring patience from all citizens. "We have reserves sufficient for 2 weeks," he announces to a crowd gathered in the forum. "Additional ships have been dispatched from Alexandria and Carthage. Citizens are advised to purchase only what they need for immediate consumption." But his words have little effect on the psychology of shortage. People who normally buy one loaf now want to buy 3. Families that usually eat meat twice a week decide to stock up on bread as a cheaper alternative. The very announcement of shortage creates additional demand that worsens the shortage. Your bakery experiences this firsthand as customers arrive with increasingly desperate requests. A middle-class family offers to trade a silver bracelet for 10 loaves of bread. An elderly widow wants to exchange her late husband's military decorations for a week's supply of food. A group of slaves sent by their master arrive with instructions to buy whatever bread is available regardless of cost. Each transaction forces you to make moral calculations. How much should you charge for bread when people are genuinely hungry? How do you balance the needs of regular customers against the demands of newcomers, willing to pay premium prices? How do you maintain fairness in a system where fairness itself becomes a luxury? The crisis also reveals the complexity of Rome's food distribution system. The city depends on grain from Egypt, North Africa, and Sicily, transported by hundreds of ships across the Mediterranean. When that system works smoothly, it can feed over 1 million people efficiently. But when it breaks down, even temporarily, the results can be catastrophic. You begin to understand why the Roman government takes grain supplies so seriously. The free distribution of bread to citizens isn't just charity, It's insurance against social unrest. Hungry people are dangerous people, and Rome has learned from bitter experience that food riots can topple governments. As evening approaches, you're exhausted from dealing with anxious customers and difficult decisions. Your inventory is nearly depleted, and tomorrow you'll have to decide whether to bake with your remaining grain or save it in case the shortage worsens. The grain crisis has transformed your quiet neighborhood bakery into a front line in the struggle for survival. You're no longer just selling bread, you're allocating a scarce resource that people need to live. It's a responsibility you never asked for, but one that comes with the territory of being an essential service provider in a complex urban society. The grain crisis brings with it a shadow economy that operates outside the normal channels of Roman commerce. By the third day of the shortage, you begin to encounter customers offering goods and services that have nothing to do with legitimate trade. A man named Cassius approaches your shop just after dawn, looking nervous and speaking in hushed tones. He's offering to sell you grain at below market prices with no questions asked about where it came from. The implication is clear: he's either stolen it from government warehouses or diverted it from military supplies. High-quality wheat from the Egyptian shipments, he whispers, glancing around to make sure no one is listening. Enough to keep your bakery running for a month, half the price you'd pay at the official markets. It's a tempting offer. The grain shortage has put tremendous pressure on your business, and cheap ingredients would allow you to maintain normal prices while your competitors struggle. But dealing with stolen goods is a serious crime in Roman law, punishable by slavery or death, depending on the value involved. You decline politely, but the encounter illustrates how quickly normal social structures can break down during a crisis. Rome's complex economy depends on trust, legal contracts, and stable institutions. When those foundations are shaken, alternative systems emerge to fill the void. The black market in grain is just one example. There's also a thriving trade in forged documents that allow non-citizens to access the government bread dole. There are bribes paid to dock workers to get advance notice of incoming ships. There are protection rackets that guarantee safe passage for merchants willing to pay extra fees. Your nephew Lucius arrives at midday with disturbing news from his neighborhood. 3 bakeries have been robbed in the past 2 days, he reports. Armed men demanding bread money or both. The vigils are spread too thin to provide adequate protection. This is the dark side of urban life in ancient Rome. The city's narrow streets and dense population create opportunities for crime that don't exist in rural areas. During normal times, social pressure and the threat of punishment keep most people honest, but crisis can transform ordinary citizens into desperate criminals. You begin to take security more seriously, keeping your most valuable inventory hidden and making sure that only trusted customers know your actual supply levels. You also start closing earlier and opening later, reducing the hours when your shop is vulnerable to robbery. But the underground economy isn't entirely criminal. It also includes legitimate activities that operate outside official channels. There's a network of women who trade bread for clothing, medical services, or other household necessities. There are retired gladiators who work as bodyguards for grain merchants. There are scribes who forge letters of credit for customers who can't read or write. One afternoon, an unusual customer enters your shop, a young woman dressed as a man with her hair cut short and her face darkened with soot. Only when she speaks do you realize that she's actually female, disguising herself to move safely through the dangerous streets. "I represent a group of households in the Aventine district," she says quietly. "We're pooling our resources to purchase bread in bulk. We can pay in silver, but we need discretion about the quantities involved." This kind of cooperative purchasing is technically legal, but it operates in a gray area of Roman commercial law. Groups of families banding together to buy food suggests a level of social organization that might worry government authorities. Rome tolerates many forms of association, but it's always suspicious of anything that might challenge official power. You agree to the arrangement partly because it's profitable, and partly because you admire the woman's courage in disguising herself to help her neighbors. Roman society may be patriarchal, but crisis often creates opportunities for women to exercise leadership in ways that wouldn't normally be acceptable. The transaction also introduces you to a different side of Roman life, the tight-knit communities that exist within the larger city. The Aventine district is home to many working families who have formed mutual aid societies to help each other through difficult times. They share childcare responsibilities, pool money for medical emergencies, and organize collective purchasing to get better prices on necessities. These informal networks are one of Rome's great strengths. While the government provides basic services like water, roads, and security, the real business of daily life is handled by countless small groups of people who help each other survive and prosper. As the week progresses, you become increasingly involved in these alternative economic networks. You trade bread for lamp oil with a merchant who has connections to North African suppliers. You accept payment in wine from a tavern keeper who's short on cash but long on inventory. You even participate in a complex three-way trade involving bread pottery and writing services. These arrangements require trust, flexibility, and a deep understanding of human nature. There are no written contracts, no legal enforcement mechanisms, no government oversight. Everything depends on reputation relationship and the mutual understanding that today's favor might be tomorrow's salvation. The underground economy also reveals the limitations of Roman monetary systems. Coins are useful for large transactions and official business, but they're less practical for small-scale bartering among people who know each other well. In a crisis, goods and services often become more valuable than money. By the end of the week, you've learned to navigate the shadow world of alternative commerce. You know which customers can be trusted with credit, which suppliers have access to scarce goods, and which transactions need to be kept quiet from government authorities. It's an education that will serve you well in the years to come. Roman history is full of crises, wars, plagues, natural disasters, political upheavals, and those who survive and prosper are often those who understand how to operate outside normal channels when normal channels fail. As the grain crisis enters its second week, Rome's religious life begins to reflect the growing anxiety of its citizens. The temples, which serve as both spiritual centers and community gathering places, become focal points for prayers, offerings, and increasingly desperate attempts to win divine favor. You participate in this religious response not just out of personal faith, but because it's expected of a respectable Roman citizen. Religion in Rome isn't a private matter between individual and deity. It's a public obligation that binds the community together and maintains the favor of the gods who protect the empire. The morning begins with an announcement that the priests of Ceres, the goddess of grain and harvest, will conduct special ceremonies to ensure the safe arrival of the delayed grain ships. Ceres is one of Rome's most important deities, and her temple on the Aventine Hill is a magnificent structure that reflects the central role of grain in Roman life. You close your bakery early and join the crowd making its way up the hill. The procession includes people from every level of Roman society: senators in their togas with purple stripes, merchants in their finest tunics, slaves carrying offerings for their masters, and countless ordinary citizens like yourself. The temple itself is an impressive sight. Built of white marble, imported from Greece, it rises in perfect classical proportions against the blue Roman sky. The columns are carved with reliefs depicting scenes of agricultural abundance, farmers harvesting grain, bakers making bread, and Ceres herself blessing the fields with fertility. Inside the temple, the air is thick with incense and the murmur of prayers. The cult statue of Ceres, made of ivory and gold, dominates the central chamber. She's depicted as a mature woman holding sheaves of wheat, her face serene but powerful. At her feet are hundreds of offerings, flowers, coins, jewelry, and small clay figurines representing prayers answered and hopes for the future. The ceremony itself is conducted by the Flamen Cerealis, a priest specifically dedicated to the goddess of grain. He's dressed in traditional Roman religious garb, a white toga with purple trim, and a distinctive pointed cap called a apex that marks his sacred office. O Ceres, he chants in the ancient Latin formulas passed down through generations. Mother of the harvest, protector of the grain, hear the prayers of your people. Send favorable winds to speed the ships from Egypt. Calm the storms that threaten our sustenance. Grant us the bread that sustains our bodies and the peace that sustains our souls. The crowd responds with the traditional acclamations, but you can hear the desperation in their voices. These aren't casual worshipers going through the motions of routine devotion. These are hungry people seeking divine intervention in a crisis that threatens their survival. After the public ceremony, there's an opportunity for private offerings. You approach the altar with a small loaf of your finest white bread, placing it among the other gifts. It's a sacrifice that represents a significant portion of your remaining inventory, but religious obligations take precedence over economic calculations. As you make your offering, you whisper your own prayer. Great Ceres, protect my family and my business. Let the grain ships arrive safely, and let the crisis pass without destroying those who depend on bread for their livelihood. The temple experience reminds you of Rome's deep conservatism in religious matters. While the empire has absorbed gods and goddesses from every corner of the known world, Egyptian Isis, Persian Mithras, Germanic tribal deities, the core Roman practices remain unchanged. The rituals you're participating in are essentially the same ones performed by farmers and bakers 500 years ago. This religious continuity provides psychological comfort during times of uncertainty. Whatever political changes occur, whatever economic crises arise, whatever military disasters threaten the empire, the gods remain constant. The prayers still work, the offerings still matter, and divine favor can still be earned through proper observance. But Roman religion is also intensely practical. The gods are expected to provide tangible benefits in return for worship and sacrifice. If Ceres doesn't send favorable winds and safe grain ships, people will begin to question whether they're honoring her properly or whether other deities might be more effective. This transactional approach to religion reflects the broader Roman worldview. Everything in life involves reciprocal obligations. Citizens owe service to the state. Clients owe loyalty to patrons. Slaves owe obedience to masters, and humans owe reverence to gods. The entire social system depends on people fulfilling their obligations and receiving appropriate rewards. After leaving the temple, you encounter other expressions of religious anxiety throughout the city. Street corner shrines, usually visited by only a few people each day, are crowded with worshippers leaving small offerings. Fortune tellers and astrologers have set up makeshift booths in the forums offering to predict when the grain crisis will end. Mystery cults that normally operate in secrecy are holding semi-public ceremonies promising salvation to those who participate. The religious response to crisis also reveals the diversity of Roman spiritual life. While the official state religion focuses on traditional Roman and Greek deities, the actual religious practices of ordinary people include influences from across the empire. You pass a group of Syrian merchants praying to their sun god Elagabal, a community of Jewish traders observing their Sabbath restrictions even during the crisis, and a gathering of Egyptian immigrants invoking Isis for protection during sea voyages. Rome's genius has always been its ability to absorb and integrate foreign influences while maintaining its essential character. As the day progresses, news arrives that seems to validate the religious response. A messenger announces that 3 grain ships have been sighted off the coast of Ostia, Rome's port city. They're still a day away from unloading, but their safe arrival suggests that the worst of the crisis may be passing. The crowds in the temple district erupt in celebration with spontaneous offerings of thanks and promises of future devotion if the ships arrive safely. You join in the general thanksgiving, but part of your mind is already calculating the practical implications. When will the grain actually reach the city markets? How will it be distributed? And what will happen to prices once the immediate shortage ends? This mixture of religious feeling and practical calculation is typically Roman. The gods deserve honor and gratitude, but human beings still need to make smart decisions about business and family welfare. Faith and pragmatism aren't contradictory. They're complementary approaches to navigating an uncertain world. The grain ships finally arrive on a bright morning in late summer, their white sails visible from the hills of Rome as they navigate the Tiber River toward the city's docks. The news spreads through the streets faster than any official messenger could carry it, transmitted by the invisible network of rumor, hope, and relief that connects every neighborhood in the city. You're among the first to hear because one of your customers, a dock worker named Gaius, runs directly from the port to your bakery with the announcement. He's covered in sweat from his sprint across the city, but his face is radiant with joy. 3 ships from Alexandria, 2 from Carthage, and 1 from Sicily. He pants, accepting the cup of water you offer. More grain than we've seen in months. The crisis is over, Marcus. We're going to eat again. The relief is overwhelming. For 2 weeks, you've been carefully rationing your flour, turning away customers, and watching your neighbors grow thin with hunger. The prospect of returning to normal operations, baking as much bread as people want to buy, feels almost too good to believe. Within hours, the effects ripple through the city's economy. The price of grain begins to drop as traders anticipate abundant supplies. Bakeries that had closed during the shortage announce plans to reopen. Customers who had been hoarding bread begin to relax their purchasing patterns. But the return to normalcy isn't immediate or simple. The grain must be unloaded, inspected, transported to warehouses, and distributed through the complex network of merchants, bakers, and food vendors that feeds the city. This process takes days, during which anxiety gradually gives way to abundance. You decide to visit the docks personally to secure your own supplies and to witness the return of prosperity to Rome. The journey to Ostia takes most of the morning following the Tiber River as it winds through the countryside south of the city. The port itself is a marvel of Roman engineering. Massive stone quays extend into the river, designed to accommodate ships from across the Mediterranean. Warehouses line the waterfront, their thick walls protecting precious cargoes from theft and weather. Cranes powered by treadmills operated by slaves lift heavy amphora from ship to shore with mechanical precision. The scene at the docks is controlled chaos. Hundreds of workers swarm over the newly arrived ships, unloading sacks of grain, jars of oil, and bundles of goods from every corner of the empire. Scribes with wax tablets record each item, ensuring that taxes are paid and inventories are accurate. Armed guards protect the most valuable cargoes from the thieves and pirates who plague commercial sinners. You approach the merchant responsible for grain distribution, a weathered man named Quintus Maximus, who has been in the shipping business for 30 years. His hands are permanently stained with dust from countless grain sacks, and his voice carries the authority of someone who understands every aspect of the trade. Marcus Flavius, he says, consulting his records, the baker from the Subura district. You've been a reliable customer, so I'll give you first choice of the new grain. Egyptian wheat, high quality, minimal spoilage. How much do you need? This is a crucial decision. Buying too little means you'll run short if another crisis develops. Buying too much ties up capital and risks spoilage if the grain sits too long in storage. You settle on a month's supply, enough to operate confidently while maintaining financial flexibility. The grain itself is beautiful. Golden kernels that feel substantial in your hand, with the sweet, nutty aroma that indicates proper storage and transport. This is what bread should be made from, not the weevil-infested, sand-contaminated emergency supplies that have sustained the city during the crisis. As the transaction is completed, you learn more about the causes of the shortage and the efforts made to resolve it. The original storm was worse than initially reported, sinking not just 6 ships, but an entire convoy of 12 vessels. The survivors had to shelter in various Mediterranean ports while their ships were repaired and new crews assembled. The emperor personally ordered additional ships from the reserve fleet, Quintus explains, and he promised bonuses to any captain who could deliver grain ahead of schedule. That's why we have 3 extra vessels beyond the normal shipments. This imperial intervention illustrates one of Rome's great strengths, the ability to mobilize resources quickly in response to crises. When the grain supply was threatened, the government acted decisively to prevent famine and social unrest. Not every civilization has the organizational capacity to coordinate such complex logistics across vast distances. The return journey to Rome is celebratory. You travel with a convoy of grain wagons, their wooden wheels creaking under the weight of precious cargo. Other bakers, merchants, and food vendors make the same trip, creating an impromptu caravan of relief and prosperity. The conversations during the journey reveal the broader impact of the crisis. Small businesses have closed, families have exhausted their savings, and some people have sold possessions to buy food. The human cost of 2 weeks without adequate grain supplies has been substantial, even though the actual shortage was relatively brief. But there's also evidence of Roman resilience. Communities have helped each other, innovative solutions have emerged, and people have adapted to difficult circumstances without losing their fundamental optimism. The crisis has been weathered, and life will continue. As the walls of Rome come into view, you feel a deep satisfaction with your role in the city's recovery. Your bakery may be small, your influence limited, but you provide an essential service that helps sustain civilization. In a world where so much depends on the coordination of countless individual efforts, your daily work contributes to something larger and more important than personal success. The grain crisis has taught you valuable lessons about the fragility and resilience of complex systems. Rome seems invincible. Its armies conquer distant lands. Its buildings last for centuries. Its laws govern millions of people. But underneath this apparent permanence lies a delicate network of relationships, resources, and institutions that must be constantly maintained and protected. Your small bakery is part of that network. The bread you bake feeds the workers who build the roads, the soldiers who defend the borders, and the citizens who participate in the political life of the Republic. In its own modest way, your daily labor helps sustain the greatest civilization the world has ever known. 3 weeks after the grain crisis ends, your nephew Lucius's wedding to Claudia takes place in a ceremony that reflects both Roman tradition and the practical realities of merchant class life. The grain shortage has delayed the celebration, but it has also demonstrated the value of the alliance between your family and Marcellus's grain trading business. The wedding preparations begin before dawn in your expanded bakery, which now occupies the shop space that Marcellus provided as part of the dowry. The larger ovens and additional storage space have transformed Lucius from a journeyman baker into a merchant-class businessman with all the social obligations that such status entails. The marriage ceremony itself follows ancient Roman customs that date back to the founding of the city. Claudia wears the traditional bridal outfit, a white tunic tied with a woolen belt that only her new husband can untie, orange shoes for good luck, and a flame-colored veil that symbolizes her transition from maiden to matron. Her hair has been arranged in the ancient style called the sex crines, 6 carefully braided locks, separated by the iron point of a spear, a reminder of Rome's martial origins. The hairstyle takes hours to achieve and requires the services of skilled slave women who specialize in bridal preparations. The ceremony takes place in the atrium of Marcellus's house, a grand space with a rectangular pool called an impluvium that catches rainwater from the opening in the roof above. The walls are decorated with frescoes depicting scenes from Roman mythology. Venus rising from the sea, Jupiter hurling thunderbolts, Ceres blessing the harvest that provide a divine backdrop for the human drama unfolding below. As the morning light streams through the compluvium, creating patterns of shadow and illumination on the marble floor, the wedding party assembles according to strict protocol. Marcellus, as the bride's father, stands beside the household shrine where the family's lares and pinatas receive their daily offerings. Lucius, nervous but dignified, in his best toga, takes his position facing the altar. The ceremony begins with the taking of auspices, the examination of bird flight patterns to determine whether the gods favor the union. A professional augur hired for the occasion studies the sky for several minutes before announcing that the omens are favorable. This isn't mere superstition. Roman law requires divine approval for all important undertakings, and a marriage conducted under unfavorable auspices would be considered invalid. The actual wedding vows are surprisingly simple by modern standards. There's no exchange of rings, no lengthy speeches about love and devotion. Instead, the couple performs the ritual called dextrarum junctio, the joining of right hands while reciting the ancient formula, ubi tu Gaius ego Gaia, where you are Gaius, I am Gaia. The words symbolize the wife's entry into her husband's family and her adoption of his legal and social status. But the simplicity of the vows masks the complexity of what's actually happening. This isn't just a union between two individuals, it's a merger between two business enterprises, two family networks, and two social positions. The marriage contract, written on papyrus and witnessed by representatives of both families, specifies not only the dowry arrangements, but also the division of property rights, inheritance obligations, and business responsibilities. The religious aspects of the ceremony reflect Rome's syncretic approach to divine matters. While the core rituals honor traditional Roman deities, there are also elements borrowed from Greek, Egyptian, and Eastern traditions. Incense burns before statues of Juno, the protector of marriage, while rose petals sacred to Venus are scattered on the floor. A small offering of honey cakes is made to the household gods, ensuring their protection of the new union. After the formal ceremony comes the wedding feast, and this is where your professional skills as a baker truly shine. You've spent 3 days preparing an elaborate menu that showcases both traditional Roman foods and the exotic ingredients that your new connection to the grain trade makes possible. The centerpiece is a massive wedding cake called a confariatio, made from spelt flour and honey in the ancient manner. The cake isn't sweet by modern standards. Romans prefer subtle flavors that don't overwhelm the palate, but it's rich with symbolism. The spelt represents fertility and abundance, while the honey signifies the sweetness of married life. Surrounding the wedding cake are dozens of smaller items that demonstrate the range of Roman baking libum cakes flavored with anise and bay leaves, placenta pastries layered with cheese and honey panis quadratus loaves stamped with the couple's initials, and delicate honey biscuits shaped like doves and flowers. The feast also includes foods that you didn't prepare, but that represent the prosperity of both families. There are fresh oysters from Britain, garum sauce from Spain, wine from the hills outside Rome, and olive oil from Greece. The meal is a demonstration of Rome's ability to bring together the best products from across the known world. The guests represent a cross-section of Roman society, from wealthy merchants and their wives to skilled craftsmen and their families. The seating arrangement follows strict social protocols. The most honored guests recline on couches near the host, while others sit on chairs or benches according to their status. But what strikes you most about the gathering is how it illustrates the complexity of Roman social relationships. Many of the guests have multiple connections to each other: business partnerships, family ties, patron-client relationships, religious associations that create a web of mutual obligation and support. The conversation during the meal reflects these interconnections. Business deals are discussed and negotiated, family news is shared and analyzed, political developments are debated and interpreted. The wedding feast serves not just as a celebration, but as a forum for the exchange of information and the maintenance of social networks. As the afternoon progresses, the tone becomes more relaxed and jovial. Wine mixed with honey loosens tongues and lowers inhibitions, leading to increasingly elaborate toasts and increasingly humorous stories. Roman wedding feasts are famous for their ribald humor and sexual innuendo, all considered appropriate ways to wish the couple a fruitful marriage. The entertainment includes professional musicians playing lyres and flutes, dancers performing traditional Roman wedding dances, and a poet who recites verses celebrating the union of two noble families. But the most memorable moment comes when an old freedman named Cassius, who has worked for Marcellus's family for 40 years, stands to offer his blessing. "I have seen 3 generations of this family," he says in a voice cracked with age and emotion. "I have watched children grow into adults, businesses flourish and struggle, fortunes rise and fall. What endures is not wealth or status, but the bonds between people who care for each other. May this marriage be blessed with such bonds." His words carry special weight because of his unique position in Roman society. As a freedman, he occupies a middle ground between slave and citizen, dependent on his former master's family, but also possessing his own dignity and wisdom. His blessing represents the approval of the extended household slaves, freedmen, and clients whose labor and loyalty make prosperity possible. As evening approaches, the ceremony moves to its final phase, the deductio or escort of the bride to her new home. This is a torchlight procession through the streets of Rome, accompanied by singing, dancing, and general celebration. The bride is carried in a litter, while the wedding party follows on foot, creating a moving festival that announces the new union to the entire neighborhood. The procession route has been carefully planned to pass through the forum, where the couple will receive blessings from passers-by, and past the temples of Juno and Venus, where additional offerings will be made. The journey ends at Lucius's new bakery, where Claudia will cross the threshold and officially become a Roman matron. As you walk through the torchlit streets, listening to the ancient wedding songs and watching your nephew begin his new life, you reflect on the continuity of Roman traditions. These customs have been practiced for centuries, connecting each new generation to the accumulated wisdom and experience of their ancestors. The wedding represents more than just a personal milestone. It's a renewal of the social contract that binds Roman society together. Through marriage, property is transferred, alliances are formed, and the next generation is prepared to take on the responsibilities of citizenship and commerce. But you also understand that tradition must adapt to changing circumstances. The grain crisis has taught everyone the importance of flexibility and innovation in the face of unexpected challenges. Lucius and Claudia will inherit established customs and practices, but they'll also need to create new solutions for new problems. As the procession reaches the bakery and Claudia is carried across the threshold to the cheers of the assembled crowd, you feel a deep satisfaction with your role in facilitating this union. Your skills as a baker, your reputation as a businessman, and your connections within the community have all contributed to your nephew's success. The wedding feast may be ending, but the relationships it has strengthened and the alliances it has created will continue to shape your family's fortunes for years to come. In the complex world of Roman society, personal success depends not just on individual effort, but on the network of connections that provide support during difficult times and opportunities during prosperous ones. As autumn arrives in Rome, bringing cooler temperatures and the promise of another year's harvest, your bakery settles into the rhythm of established prosperity. The grain crisis has passed. Your nephew's marriage has secured valuable business connections, and your reputation as a reliable baker has grown throughout the Suburra district. But Rome is never static. The empire continues to expand, bringing new peoples, new goods, and new challenges to the eternal city. Your small bakery provides a window into these larger changes as you serve customers from across the known world and adapt your business to meet their diverse needs. The morning brings news that Emperor Hadrian has ordered the construction of a massive wall across northern Britain designed to keep the troublesome Pictish tribes from raiding Roman settlements. The project will require thousands of workers and enormous amounts of supplies, including the hardtack bread that sustains armies on long campaigns. A military contractor named Lucius Cornelius visits your shop to discuss supplying bread for the workers being recruited in Rome. It's a potentially lucrative contract, but it would require expanding your operation and maintaining consistent quality over many months. We need bread that will last for weeks without spoiling, he explains, examining samples of your hardest baked loaves. The workers will be living in temporary camps, often far from supply lines. Everything must be designed for durability rather than immediate consumption. This is a different kind of baking challenge. Military bread must be dry enough to resist mold, hard enough to survive rough handling, and nutritious enough to sustain heavy physical labor. The recipe requires more salt for preservation, less water for longer storage, and careful timing to achieve the proper texture. You spend several days experimenting with different formulations, testing each batch for durability and taste. The process teaches you new techniques that will be useful for regular customers who need bread that keeps well during hot summer months or long trading journeys. The military contract also introduces you to the broader economic implications of Roman expansion. Every new province requires roads, fortifications, and administrative buildings. Every campaign creates demand for weapons, tools, and supplies. The empire's growth generates a constant stream of business opportunities for those positioned to take advantage of them. But expansion also brings cultural changes that affect daily life in unexpected ways. A group of Syrian merchants establishes a trading post near your bakery, introducing neighborhood residents to new spices, cooking techniques, and eating habits. Their flatbreads, seasoned with herbs unknown in traditional Roman cuisine, become popular among customers looking for variety. You learn to incorporate some of these foreign influences into your own products. Bread made with coriander seeds appeals to Eastern immigrants. Loaves flavored with fennel attract customers from Gaul. Small sweet cakes made with dates and almonds find favor among wealthy Romans who want to demonstrate their sophistication and worldliness. This culinary fusion reflects a broader pattern in Roman society. The empire's success depends not just on military conquest, but on cultural assimilation. Foreign peoples aren't simply subjugated, they're gradually integrated into Roman civilization, contributing their own knowledge and traditions to the common pool. Your own family exemplifies this process. As a freedman, you've risen from slavery to respectability through hard work and social adaptation. Your nephew's marriage has elevated him into the merchant class, providing opportunities that would have been unimaginable a generation ago. Your son is growing up as a full Roman citizen with all the rights and responsibilities that status entails. But integration comes with challenges as well as opportunities. The influx of foreign workers and slaves creates competition for jobs and housing. Traditional Roman customs sometimes clash with imported practices. Economic prosperity doesn't distribute itself evenly across all segments of society. You observe these tensions daily in your customer interactions. Old Roman families complain about foreigners taking jobs from citizens. Recent immigrants struggle with language barriers and cultural misunderstandings. Wealthy households worry about maintaining their status as new sources of wealth emerge. The afternoon brings a different kind of challenge, a visit from a government inspector who's checking businesses for compliance with new regulations regarding weights and measures. The empire's growth has made standardization increasingly important, ensuring that a loaf of bread in Rome weighs the same as a loaf in Alexandria or Londinium. All bread sold to the public must conform to standard weights, the inspector announces, consulting his bronze measuring tools. Penalties for short waiting include fines, business closure, and in severe cases, exile from the city. This bureaucratic intrusion irritates you, but you understand its necessity. Rome's commercial success depends on trust and predictability. Customers need to know that they're getting fair value for their money. Whether they're buying bread in the local market or ordering supplies for a military campaign in distant provinces. The inspection reveals the sophisticated administrative apparatus that underlies Roman prosperity. Every business is registered, every transaction is potentially subject to review, and every citizen's activities are recorded in government files. It's a level of state oversight that would be impossible without the literate bureaucracy that Rome has developed. As the inspector completes his work and pronounces your scales and weights satisfactory, you reflect on the balance between freedom and order that characterizes Roman civilization. Individual entrepreneurs have significant liberty to pursue profit and innovation, but they operate within a framework of laws and regulations designed to promote general welfare. This balance isn't perfect, and it's constantly being adjusted as circumstances change. The grain crisis demonstrated both the system's vulnerabilities and its resilience. The wedding feast illustrated how personal relationships and business interests intertwine. The military contract shows how private enterprise serves public purposes. Your bakery has become a microcosm of the larger Roman experiment, the attempt to create a civilization that combines individual opportunity with collective stability, local autonomy with imperial unity, traditional values with adaptive innovation. As evening approaches and you prepare to close the shop, you're visited by an unexpected customer, a young Roman noble named Marcus Aurelius, who's making a tour of local businesses as part of his education and governance. He's accompanied by a small entourage of advisors and bodyguards, but his manner is surprisingly humble and inquisitive. "I'm trying to understand how the empire actually works," he explains, examining your ovens and equipment with genuine interest. "The Senate debates grand policies, but the real business of civilization happens in places like this. How do you see your role in the larger system?" It's a profound question from someone who might someday hold significant power. You consider your response carefully, wanting to be honest, but also respectful of his obvious intelligence and sincerity. "I make bread," you say simply, "but bread feeds the workers who build the roads, the soldiers who defend the borders, and the citizens who govern the provinces. Every honest trade contributes to something larger than itself." He nods thoughtfully, making notes on a wax tablet. "And what do you need from the government to do your job well?" "Stable grain supplies, fair laws, protection from crime, and the freedom to serve customers according to their needs and my abilities." You reply, "Most of what makes Rome great happens because people are allowed to pursue their own interests in ways that benefit the common good." The young nobleman's visit reminds you that your daily work has political dimensions that extend far beyond the boundaries of your neighborhood. The bread you bake doesn't just feed individuals, it sustains the social order that makes civilized life possible. As night falls and you perform your evening rituals, you feel a deep satisfaction with your place in the Roman world. You're not a senator or a general, but you're a citizen of the greatest empire in history, contributing your skills and labor to a civilization that will endure for centuries to come. Winter arrives early this year, bringing with it the inevitable cycle of death and renewal that marks the passage of time in any human community. Your elderly mother, who has been declining slowly for months, finally succumbs to the respiratory ailment that claims so many Romans during the cold season. Her death, while expected, still comes as a profound shock to your household. She was the last link to your family's earlier life as slaves, the keeper of memories and traditions that connected you to a past that was often painful, but also formative. Her funeral becomes both a personal farewell and a community event that illustrates the complex social rituals surrounding death in Roman society. Roman funeral customs reflect the civilization's practical approach to mortality, combined with deep respect for family continuity. The body must be prepared quickly. There's no embalming in the Egyptian manner, so decomposition is a constant concern. Professional undertakers, many of them freedmen like yourself, handle the technical aspects, while family members focus on the ceremonial elements. Your mother is dressed in her finest clothing, a wool stola that she wore only on special occasions, and her hands are arranged to hold a small bronze coin that will pay the ferryman Charon for passage across the river Styx. This mixing of practical preparation with mythological belief typifies Roman attitudes toward death, acknowledging both the physical reality of mortality and the spiritual hope for continuation. The funeral procession through the streets of the Suburra reflects your family's rise in social status. While you can't afford the elaborate ceremonies that mark the deaths of senators and generals, you're able to provide a respectable send-off that honors your mother's memory and demonstrates your success as a Roman businessman. The procession includes hired mourners, professional women who wail and tear their clothing in the traditional expressions of grief. This might seem artificial to modern sensibilities, but in Roman culture, Public displays of emotion serve important social functions. They announce the death to the community, provide an outlet for genuine grief, and demonstrate the family's respect for the deceased. More meaningful to you are the genuine mourners who join the procession voluntarily. Neighbors who remember your mother's kindness during difficult times, customers who appreciated her advice about household management, and fellow freedmen who respected her dignity in the face of life's challenges. Their presence validates her life and your family's place in the community. The funeral pyre is built outside the city walls, as Roman law requires. The prohibition against burial within the city reflects practical concerns about public health, but it also serves symbolic purposes. Death is acknowledged as part of life, but it's kept at a respectful distance from the daily activities of the living. As the flames consume your mother's body and her possessions, a few pieces of simple jewelry, some pottery she treasured, and a small wooden statue of the household gods, you reflect on the continuity of generations that make civilization possible. She was born a slave, lived as a freedwoman, and died as the honored matriarch of a respectable family. Her life embodied the Roman promise that hard work and moral character can overcome the circumstances of birth. The period of mourning that follows her death brings your family closer together while also highlighting the practical challenges of loss. Your mother's daily contributions to the household, managing servants, overseeing food preparation, maintaining family traditions, must now be redistributed among other family members. Your wife, Livia, assumes many of these responsibilities, but she's already busy with her own duties in the bakery and household. Your son, Marcus, now 11 years old, takes on additional chores while continuing his education. The adjustment period is difficult, but it also provides opportunities for family members to develop new skills and strengthen their bonds. The business continues to operate during the mourning period, but with modifications that reflect Roman customs regarding grief and remembrance. You wear dark clothing for 30 days, avoid elaborate meals and entertainment, and make regular offerings at your mother's tomb. These observances aren't just personal expressions of loss, they're social obligations that demonstrate proper respect for family values. Your customers, many of whom knew your mother personally, express their condolences and share their own memories of her. These conversations provide comfort while also reinforcing the community connections that sustain urban life. In a city of over 1 million people, personal relationships become even more precious because they're more difficult to maintain. The winter months following your mother's death are marked by introspection and planning. The grain supplies remain stable, your business relationships are strong, and your family's financial position is secure. But the reminder of mortality prompts you to think more carefully about the future and your responsibilities to the next generation. You begin making arrangements for your son's formal education beyond the basic reading and writing he's learned at home. A good education is expensive. It requires hiring private tutors or sending him to one of the schools that operate in the better districts of the city. But education is also the key to advancement in Roman society, where literate men have opportunities unavailable to those who work only with their hands. The educational plans also reflect your ambitions for your family's continued rise in social status. While you're content with your life as a baker, you want your son to have options that you never had. Perhaps he'll become a scribe or accountant, managing the business affairs of wealthy families. Perhaps he'll study rhetoric and become an advocate in the courts. Perhaps he'll follow his uncle Lucius into the expanding grain trade. These dreams require careful financial planning and strategic thinking. Education costs money, but so do the social connections that make education valuable. Your son will need proper clothing, appropriate friends, and exposure to the cultural activities that mark educated Romans. All of this represents an investment in a future that you may not live to see, but that will justify your life's work. Spring arrives with the usual Roman festivals celebrating renewal and fertility. The celebration of Flora, goddess of flowers and spring, transforms the city into a riot of color and excitement. Your bakery contributes special cakes and pastries made with early fruits and honey, while your customers share news of pregnancies, betrothals, and business expansions. The cycle of seasons reminds you that individual lives are part of larger patterns that extend far beyond personal experience. Your mother's death was sad but not tragic. She lived a full life and died surrounded by family who honored her memory. Your son's education represents hope for the future and confidence in the stability of Roman civilization. As you work in your bakery serving customers and managing your small business, you're participating in processes that have sustained human communities for thousands of years. People need food, shelter, and social connections. They seek prosperity for their families and hope for their children. They honor their ancestors and plan for the future. The specific forms these universal needs take may be uniquely Roman. The particular foods you prepare, the social customs you observe, the political institutions you support. But the underlying human drives are timeless and universal. Your story as Marcus Flavius Friedman and baker is both ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary because millions of people throughout history have lived similar lives of honest work and family devotion. Extraordinary because you're living it in Rome at the height of its power, when a single city governs much of the known world and creates a civilization that will influence human development for millennia. As the sun sets over the eternal city and you prepare for another night's rest, you can hear the sounds of life continuing around you. Children playing in the streets, merchants closing their shops, families gathering for evening meals. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities, but also the comforting routine of work that gives meaning and purpose to human existence. The bread you'll bake tomorrow will nourish bodies that house souls connected to the great chain of being that stretches from the gods to the humblest slave. In your own small way, you're helping to sustain not just individual lives, but the entire magnificent experiment of Roman civilization. Years pass, and your bakery becomes a fixture in the Subura district, known for consistent quality and fair dealing. Your son Marcus grows into a learned young man who speaks Greek as well as Latin, can calculate complex business transactions in his head, and writes with the elegant hand of a professional scribe. The investment in his education proves worthwhile when he secures a position managing accounts for a wealthy senator's household. Your nephew Lucius's marriage to Claudia flourishes, producing 3 children and a thriving grain trading business that expands beyond Rome to include operations in Alexandria and Carthage. The alliance between your families creates opportunities that neither could have achieved alone, demonstrating the power of strategic relationships in Roman society. The empire itself continues to grow and evolve during your lifetime. New provinces are added, new technologies are developed, and new challenges are met with characteristic Roman pragmatism and innovation. The wall in Britain is completed, becoming a permanent symbol of imperial boundaries. Trade networks expand to include goods from India and even distant China. The legal system is refined and codified, creating principles that will influence jurisprudence for centuries. But perhaps most remarkably, the daily life that you represent, the life of ordinary people pursuing ordinary goals through honest work and family devotion, continues largely unchanged despite the grand historical events occurring around it. People still need bread, still form families, still seek prosperity and security for their children. Your story ends as it began, with the simple rhythm of daily work that sustains civilization. The ovens must be heated, the dough must be kneaded, the customers must be served. These mundane activities, repeated millions of times by countless individuals, create the foundation upon which empires are built and cultures flourish. In the grand narrative of Roman history, you'll never be mentioned in the chronicles that record the deeds of emperors and generals. But your life represents something equally important: the countless individual stories of people who lived with dignity, worked with skill, and loved with devotion during one of humanity's greatest civilizational achievements. The bread you baked has long since been consumed. The building that housed your shop has probably been rebuilt many times, and even your name has been forgotten by history. But the values you embodied, honesty, industry, family loyalty, and civic responsibility, remain part of the cultural inheritance that Rome bequeathed to the world. And in that sense, your story never really ends. Every time someone chooses honest work over easy profit, every time a family sacrifices for their children's future, every time a community comes together to overcome crisis, the spirit of Marcus Flavius lives on. The eternal city may have fallen to barbarians centuries after your death, but the ideals it represented, the possibility of ordered liberty, the dream of universal law, the hope that individual effort can contribute to collective prosperity, continue to inspire human societies around the world. Your simple bakery, with its warm ovens and honest bread, becomes a metaphor for all the humble enterprises that make civilization possible. Not the grand monuments that tourists visit, not the famous battles that historians study, but the daily work of ordinary people who believe that their efforts matter and that the future can be better than the past. This is the secret of daily life in ancient Rome. It wasn't so different from daily life anywhere else at any other time. People wake up, work hard, care for their families, and hope for better days ahead. The specific circumstances change. The technologies evolve. The social systems adapt. The political institutions rise and fall. But the fundamental human story remains constant. And perhaps that's the most remarkable thing about your time in ancient Rome, the recognition that beneath all the surface differences that separate historical periods and cultures, there lies a common humanity that connects us all. The baker in ancient Rome and the baker in modern Paris share more than just a profession. They share the timeless human desire to create something useful to serve their community and to leave the world a little better than they found it. So as your story ends and you disappear into the vast anonymity of history, remember that you've played a part in something eternal. The bread you baked may be gone, but the hunger it satisfied enabled other people to do their own important work. The family you raised carried forward values that enriched their community. The business you built created prosperity that benefited countless others. In the end, that's what the secrets of daily life in ancient Rome really teach us, that civilization is built one loaf at a time, one honest transaction at a time, one loving family at a time. The glory belongs to everyone who contributes, not just to those whose names are carved in marble. And with that thought, as the last embers of your ovens cool and the last customer leaves your shop, you can rest, knowing that your life was well lived and your work was meaningful. The eternal city will remember you in the only way that truly matters, not as a name in a history book, but as a spirit that helped make Rome what it was, the greatest civilization the world had ever known. Sleep well, Marcus Flavius. You've earned your rest.